Hi everybody, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and if you like what you see, please consider thumbing up the video, subscribing to the channel or the Patreon, but mainly just leave a comment and let me know your thoughts about the game in question or the video in general. We'll get on in just a sec, but first, a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So I know you guys are always complaining about, oh, you're always doing heavy games, Lou. What about something light and fluffy, something more for family? So I thought, great, I've got the perfect game for you right here. Just a second. Excuse me a minute. Right, that's more like it. Perseverance Episode 1 and 2. This is the next mega bugs from Mindclash games, who you will know are quite popular with me when it comes to their heavy games. I love Anachrony, I love Dracarion, and I love Cerebria. So honestly, the next one on the line was certainly going to get my attention, and this one has you dealing with dinosaurs on a mysterious island. But this is 2 games in one. So you've got Episode 1, you've got Episode 2, and no doubt they'll do 3 and 4 in the future. This was a Kickstarter copy, not a review copy. I bought this with my own money, and this is the deluxe set, but I will talk about it from a retail perspective as well. I was a little bit, shall we say, apprehensive about the whole Episode 1 and 2 thing. You're buying 2 games, yes, but then what if you don't like one game but you like the other? Are they interconnected? Are they any different? Or is it going to just hurt this in the long run? For now, I'm going to get it off my shoulder and we'll talk about it in more detail. Perseverance, Castaway Chronicles introduces the first 2 episodes in a series of Euro-style dice drafting placement strategy games. The saga will ultimately consist of 4 episodes, telling the story of a group of survivors becoming a mighty civilization on a hostile island. As each episode features unique characteristics and a different game feel, they are playable as standalone medium/heavy games, medium, yeah right, but also as a continuous campaign. In Episode 1, players are striving to develop and protect the foothold town of Perseverance. By building walls, traps and settlements, mounting defenses and partaking in the early political power struggles of a forming community, players gain followers to establish themselves as leaders. Episode 1 introduces the signature dice placement area majority mechanism that evolves and spans through the series. In Episode 2, the survivors have successfully defended the city of Perseverance and now seek to explore the surrounding wilderness. This episode adds new actions to expand the core mechanism and allows for a deep customization of your leader and faction through dozens of unique skills. The previous episode's defense mechanism evolves into hex-based adventuring and expansion, allowing you to build outposts beyond the city walls, which can be additional actions for players. But beware, the dinosaurs are still not your friends and they will be trying to attack your outposts as and when you build them. 2 giant Euro games, lots and lots of dinosaurs, but in both, of course, whoever amasses the most followers out of all players is the winner.
Of course!
So for the purposes of this video, I will be talking about both episodes 1 and 2 sort of concurrently within the categories, because let's face it, you're not going to buy this if you like one game but not the other. It's basically a whole cohesive pack, so it makes sense to just do one video and cover everything, but I'll try to keep the time length down as much as I can.
Well, we're boned.
Now for a Mindclash game, you have to accept that the duration is going to be long.
That's putting it mildly, 007.
Even in this case, long is an understatement. This is a really long game to get through, whether it's episode 1 or 2. You have to really set aside a good 3 hours plus for your game, and I am not kidding when you're probably going to get it down to a best 2.5 hours for episode 1, but it could take anywhere up to 4 hours for episode 2, particularly if you're 4 players or if you've got anybody semi-learning the game. This game is a really long affair, and I dare say longer than the other ones put together, frankly. We can get Anachrony and Dracarion and even Cerebria done in much quicker time than a 4-player game of Perseverance either episode does. And that wouldn't be so bad if it was just a case of, oh well, it's a long Euro game, as long as you're engaged throughout. Here's the problem. You're not. Not by a long shot. The downtime in this game is downright ridiculous because you have to draft your action dice from a pool of dice. But here's the problem, and it's a similar case with Le Havre if you've ever played that game. The number of dice in the pool is what determines how many turns you have in the game. In a 4-player game, you have on average about 14 dice in a round before the next interim scoring, the assemblies as they're called. So that means that each round you only have 3, maximum 4 turns in the game. Which means that technically you have no more than about 10 to 12 turns in the entire game. Now, I talked about Merchants of the Dark Road at one point, maybe before or after this video, and that has a similar thing of 13 turns. Merchants of the Dark Road you can get done in 90 to 120 minutes though. 3 to 4 hours on the other hand, that is unacceptable amount of turns.
Everybody's okay with this?
Did I miss something?
And the turns are wildly, spaced out in terms of how long they take. It's a little better in episode 1. I will give it credit. Episode 1 is a little bit more on the streamlined side for the time frame, and the turns are a little bit more even, other than when the combat start happening, and that elongates things. Episode 2, though, is insane. Episode 2, you could literally have a turn where you just go to a spot and take 2 scrap. That's it. That takes me 5 seconds to do. I put 2 scrap and I'll put a cube on this officer. There you go, my turn is done in 10 seconds. Okay? If only every single turn lasted that long. Some players in episode 2 can go off on an adventure. Right, so what do you do on the adventure? Well, first, let's see. I'm going to decide which of the 2 of these 3 actions I'm going to do. I'm going to do this first one. Right, so this means I've got to clear some dinosaurs off that hex. Right, okay. That means I need to assign these people. I'll assign maybe the heavy, maybe the light, I don't know, maybe the leader. All right, fine, we'll put those in. Right, allocate hits, take the damage. Who's going to die? Are any of them going to die? Well, that lays over. Maybe I'll sacrifice the heavy. Could spend this in order to save that. Fair enough. Right, okay. Dinosaurs are cleared and I've got some points in that. Great. What next? Oh yeah, second part of the action. Now I gotta clear this hex off the board, and then I'll lay an adventure card, and then I'll put some of these figures on it, and then I'll decide which rewards I want to get from the first stage of that. The adventure action in episode 2 is such a drag. I felt sorry for the people I played episode 2 with because I remember focusing a lot, in one game specifically, I remember focusing a lot in adventures and the explorer action, which meant all my turns were taking a very long time to resolve purely just because of the amount of stuff you have to do. And it's not like it's an uncommon action, it's one of the best actions on the table. So lots of people are doing it, and it just drags on so long. Why did it have to be all within one action? Why couldn't you have spaced it out? You know, taking some of those get 2 scrap actions that are rubbish if you take them. I mean, come on, you've got what, 10 to 12 turns in this game, and you're gonna waste one of those turns to get 2 scrap? Wow, you're not doing well if that's the case. Why is it like that? And this whole game just feels like it's way too long for the amount of time that you are actively taking a turn. The snippets of other things like a dinosaur combat here or some other aspect resolving over there is not enough, especially in episode 2. And episode 2 is, spoiler alert, the one I prefer out of the 2 for gameplay wise. But man, you've got to sink a lot of time investment into it, and it's just frankly too much. For ease of play, well, I hope you like rulebooks because you got a lot of them. Oh my god. Obviously this is 2 games, so you expect 2 rulebooks, one for episode 1 and one for episode 2. You also have another full-size rulebook for the solo mode from David Turksey, more on that later, and another rulebook for the Chronicles mode, which is essentially like a solo / 2-player thing that you can do with turning it into a sort of narrative. Honestly, not particularly worth it, but more on that later. So you've got to try and learn this game with 4 separate books. God help you. But then, okay, alright, let's just take one episode in general. How big are these rulebooks? Oh boy, yeah. They're not too bad in sense of how they're laid out, but there's a lot of rules in this game. There's a lot of text. There are pictorial representations and they are cool, but you have got a smorgasbord of iconography. You've got all sorts of these little tiny rules that throw themselves into the mix. So, you might think, oh, it's just simply do this, this, and this. No. Because if this happens, you should do this. But then you've also got to consider if this happens, you do this. Oh, by the way, don't forget to do a dino attack at the end of your turn. There's so much stuff going on that it burns your brain to get the hang of it. It's a very slow learning process. And you might think, well, come on, it's a heavy game. Don't you expect it? Heavy games can still be relatively streamlined in the mechanics though, particularly when you're teaching the game. If I take Ark Nova, for example, you know, recent love of my life, that one, right, yes, it's a heavy game and it's got a lot of rules, but when I teach it, I can teach it in a relatively streamlined manner, mainly because the theme also helps in that regard. Here though, there's a lot of overhead, a lot of rules overhead. You're going to be spending ages teaching this game, like 45 minutes plus just teaching the game before you even get stuck into the huge time length. This is really a game that's going to favour a same group playing it. Like, you really don't want to have new players in your group when you're playing this, unless you treat it as an event, because otherwise it's going to take till the end of time. It's a huge learning curve. And honestly, if you don't play this regularly enough, you're gonna forget these rules because it's not like a lot of them are intuitive. They're very specific rules, so you need to play this regularly. Good luck trying to get the game this long to the table though. It's not gonna help. That being said, I was thankful that the rulebooks were actually a decent condition. Yeah, they're not bad rulebooks, although for the solo mode, we'll talk about that now, the solo mode does have some glaring rules issues, particularly in episode 2. Check out Paul Grogan's playthroughs that he has done of episode 1 and episode 2, look at his videos, his playthroughs of the solo mode, and you will note that there are a lot of rules errors that are in the book because it feels like it was a bit of a copy and pasted affair. That is not acceptable in a game this big and this expensive. The graphic design on the board is fine though. Yeah, you can sort of fairly clearly see where the actions are, what symbols they are. I didn't have a problem deciphering what was on the dice or anything like that. So all in all, that's good. But yeah, you're gonna have to really set your brain aside and, you know, maybe not go to work that day to learn this game. Well, hopefully the game itself is fun, right, Luke? Yeah. It is. This is a fun game to play. I'm not going to deny that. Episode 1 and 2 do work very similarly. It is all about the dice drafting of that action pool. But honestly, the dice drafting is something we've seen in a lot of games, and it's not particularly different here. It's just that if you want to go to a space, if there's a symbol for it, you got to use it first or something like that. And if you use another player's dice, you lose a couple of points. And the colors matter for area control for like the assembly scoring. And that's kind of it really. Aside from that, it's mainly just the same thing you've seen with dice drafting before. It's just a lot of action spaces that you can go to. Episode 1 focuses more on the defense area. It's more like a tower defense game. So you're building the settlements, and yes, you want area control in that, but you're mainly setting up defenses for the dinosaurs, which you can see pop onto the map as you do actions. So you can think, right, I'm going to put some traps there, some soldiers there. And I do like the fact that when you resolve the combat for the dinosaurs in episode 1, you have a selection of rewards you can do that you're gonna have to. I mean, that's the crux of the game. That's how you get the majority of your points. But they're very, very different. You might think, oh, it's how many dinosaurs did I kill? Not necessarily. It could literally be how many people you lost. It could be just a flat, straight up amount of victory points. How many traps did you have? How many wolves did you have? There's a lot of different rewards that you can pick off that list in order to get points, and it does allow for some slightly different strategies to be used. Now, granted, you're not going to be too divergent from other people, because at the end of the day, you're all trying to defend. I mean, if you don't defend at all, good luck trying to win with that. But whether I decide to go heavy on the wolves front or heavy on the people front, or try and kill as many dinosaurs as I can, or mainly just take the hits and like push it back while maybe getting some more settlements, you've got a few options of what to do, and that's pretty cool. In episode 2, I love the fact that you have all those skills. Your basic dude in episode 1 is just generic. It's got one little special ability, whatever. There is no customization, and it does feel a little bit samey. Episode 2 though, whoa, okay, you have no special ability because you have to unlock all the skills, and you have a ton of them on your board. I think it's like 5 times 6, I think it's like 30 odd skills or something you've got on your board. It's ridiculous. Now, this does make it a bit of a learning nightmare because it's iconography all over the place, but you can really customize your character and your path to victory. Are you going to go heavy politics? Well, then you might want to level up this particular guy who gives you all the stuff to do with the politics actions. But then you're like, alright, in my game, I'm going to go heavy on killing loads of dinosaurs. I'm going to wipe them all out, exterminate them all.
Dear sweet little foot.
Oh, come on!
I am evil Homer,
I am evil Homer.
Or maybe the security chief would be a good thing because he gives me bonuses in order to try and kill the dinosaurs. Somebody likes to trap them, somebody likes to keep them whole, somebody likes to just build settlements, another person's not really content, just wants to go explore and do adventures. You really can diverge to a different path to victory in episode 2, and that's before you even get to the outposts that you can build on the map in order to put different worker placement actions out. Episode 2 definitely takes the thumbs up for me in terms of being like much more varied each game you play. Now that being said, episode 2 does have the issue of the exploration map maybe being a little bit oversold. The whole explore part in both games, frankly, is just an adventure patrol card, which is literally just put a few people on it and resolve some bonuses. That's it. I mean, they don't even give you any narrative. It's literally the title of the card and that's it. I mean, I don't know, insert your own story here, basically. And it makes such a big deal in episode 2 about, let's get to that hidden structure in the middle, that temple. Who the hell cares?
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
The temple is pointless, really. It's a miniature on the board, great. You have one adventure card that scores you points if you go to it and fulfill those 2 exact criteria. If your strategy or your game has not gone down the way where you can properly monopolize that adventure card, the temple is entirely worthless to you. There's no other bonuses for getting it. There's no like, oh, I reached the temple first, therefore I get all the bonuses. No, it's just another patrol card, adventure card even, and that's it. And honestly, I've used it once in the games I've played, and it wasn't even that lucrative. It keeps going on about that temple, and yet honestly just stay in your settlement. It's a lot more lucrative points wise. The game does have a reasonable amount of interaction with players, not necessarily direct, but you're going to be blocking each other in assemblies, you're going to be trying to nab outposts before they do, use each other's camps and stuff like that, and certainly you're vying for the area control part. And so rather than it being non-interactive, it's a little bit on the vicious side. For a 3 to 4 hour game, you've got to be a little bit careful if you're not a fan of mean games, because you can get hosed pretty harshly, literally by one person doing an action that you may or may not have seen coming. Because to lose assembly scoring hurts. You really want to get a decent amount of points in those assemblies and like the leader bonuses, particularly in episode 2. Episode 1 kind of varies. But then all it takes is for one person to usurp you by 1 on a settlement color, or maybe, oh, like on my last turn I was able to get a yellow die onto that one. Well, now I control this whole area and I get to share in more of the bonuses. It really does hurt to get screwed by another player here, and in a 4-player game, there's not a lot you can do to mitigate that. You kind of just have to accept it may happen. It's a bit easier when you have less players, but as I say, you've just got to be careful that if you're not a fan of mean games, you might want to stay away. There's not a huge amount of difference between the retail and the deluxe version of this game, frankly. Seriously, you're getting your money's worth for the retail version. The aesthetics in this are really good. The main 2 differences is that these little glow berries, which are like little squishy berries that remind me of the ones from Everdell, you get them in the deluxe version and they're nice, they're neat, they're cool, but honestly, cardboard tokens will do me fine. And you get standees rather than miniatures for the dinosaurs, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of these miniatures and standees in there. It's basically, do you want a 3D miniature of a dinosaur, or would you prefer a painted artwork standee? Honestly, the standees look pretty cool, and even if you buy the deluxe version, you get the retail stuff in the box, so it's not like you're one or the other. But honestly, yeah, if you bought the retail version and played it, you would still have a ton of really nice looking tokens and pieces and good custom dice and decent artwork and everything. Don't feel that you have to get the deluxe version. Really, frankly, the only reason to get the deluxe version is if you want the dinosaur minis. If you have no interest in miniatures, get the retail version, honestly, because this may be a Kickstarter deluxe version, but I didn't desperately need the minis. I mean, they're cool, but yeah, you know what? I could have saved myself some cash and just bought the retail version and got more than my money's worth in the box. Everything looks cool. The graphic design, as I said, was pretty clear cut. The artwork itself is pretty gorgeous. The trays, great. Love the trays. It makes storage for this game a breeze. Not for setup. I mean, you do have to take quite a bit out and do various things with the setup, like get the right dice, get the right cards and that, so setup is still a bit of a chore. But when you're storing it in the box, it's nice that everything does at least sit in a nice insert that you can just sort of go, right, hang on, I need these many player trays, and then I need the tray for communal game, and then I need the tray for just episode 2. Right, we can leave that in the box, and we can leave the solo stuff in the box. Great. However, all these great aesthetics come at a price. Firstly, the price. The price for this game is pretty extreme. You are getting 2 very deluxified games for the price of 1 here. But the other part is, you've got to keep it like that. That is how it stores. This giant box that takes up a good half of your Kallax shelf by itself. You cannot separate this out. So if you decide, you know what, I don't particularly like episode 1, I just want to keep episode 2 and maybe get rid of episode 1, you can't. You have to keep it all in that box because the components are shared. So you're kind of really forced to like both. And I really would have preferred if they found a way to separate the boxes. Let people decide whether they want to have 1, 2, 3, and 4 as part of a series. Here though, you are being forced to appreciate this as a series, and not everybody is going to want to. For Immersion, the time length does hurt the fact that you may just get a little bit disconnected over time, because once it starts getting to that late game stage, you're like, still going, okay, I can only hold on for so much longer. The whole dinosaur world building in this is cool, although even if you play the Chronicles mode, you're not really getting like the richest of story narratives here. And if you just play them as standalone games, it's mainly a case of, right, we're doing a typical Euro game, except now we got cool dinosaurs in the background, and you know, dinosaurs are cool. In episode 1, they are attacking you and you're defending from them. Okay, that's pretty sweet. I prefer the Immersion in episode 2 though, where I have that little map to explore, where, you know, we're taking camps, and the idea is that when I use a camp, a dinosaur counterattacks us, and so but then they hang around so that other players can jump in and help out others, mainly just to get their own glory points. But you know, the dinosaurs are cool, and it is a fun world to be in, but it's not like there's a rich story here. And that's what concerns me with this whole, like, episode 1, 2, 3, and 4 thing. I think this whole episode structure is going to hurt this more than it's going to help it, because even if I had all 4 episodes, I don't see myself playing this all the way through and going, oh my god, that was a gripping story. Oh my god, what will happen in episode 3? No, it's a big Euro game at the end of the day. Do you want heavy Euro game, the tower defense game, or do you want heavy Euro game, the exploration combat game? I don't know, whichever you would describe episode 2 as. What are they going to do for 3 and 4? I don't know. I mean, there's only so many different mechanics they can really go for. I'd laugh my head off if they tried a trick-taking variant. But you're mainly in this for the big, heavy strategy Euro game, not so much for the theme. Dinosaurs are cool, yes, and the miniatures and standees certainly help to convey that, but they're sort of there just to be more of a nuisance, really. In episode 1, they're a bit more mainstay, like, okay, yeah, we are actually defending from these things. In episode 2, you spend ages setting them up on the board, and then it's only occasionally that they will actually pop and get you. It depends what people do on that map. So they kind of feel a little bit more like an artificial extra in episode 2. So while I'm playing this, even solo, I don't necessarily feel like, oh, rich story. The Chronicles mode does give you a little assistance with that, but honestly, it's not that important. I mean, you've got like a little storybook here with, you know, some very decent artwork and kind of like the Memoirs of a Survivor, it's called. And it's essentially the story of this game, but honestly, I got bored after reading the first few paragraphs. You know, it's not really like the best of writing. It's just like, okay, cool, pretty pictures and a little bit of backstory on the various characters. But seriously, are you playing a character because you want to play, you know, I forget her name. I'm just going to call her Jinx because she reminds me of Jinx from Arcane. But, you know, I'm not playing her because I like her backstory. I'm playing her because she looks like Jinx. You know, and Jinx is awesome. But it's just like, yeah, the immersion's there, but I never really felt like, you know, not as much as something like Dinosaur Island, for example, where I really got into that whole Jurassic Park style theme of building a Dinosaur Island theme park. This one just feels like, you know what, you could have actually made this game with something other than dinosaurs and not actually had to change the mechanics at all. Now, in terms of longevity, you are getting, well, 2 games for the price of 1 here, so you're certainly getting your money's worth in terms of content, but this does depend a lot on whether you like both games, because honestly, I like episode 2 more than episode 1 in terms of gameplay, but then, and the customization factor, but then episode 2 takes so long, ridiculously long. So I think, alright, well, let's play episode 1. It's a little bit shorter, although shorter in big if quotes. You know, it's certainly not short. But then episode 1 gets a little bit samey. You know, yes, you've got the different, like, sort of mini strategies you can go for with which rewards you take off the dino combat sheet. But other than that, it's mainly the same thing. You draft a few dice, and I do mean a few dice, and do some actions, defend from the same dinos all the time. The dinos aren't that particularly varied. It's just one doesn't cause you damage, one takes more hits to kill. That's pretty much the deal with like the differences for the most part, except for, I think the raptors do some extra thing with settlements in episode 1. That's about it. Really, the dinosaurs are fairly generic in that regard. Now, the paths to victory in episode 2 are a lot better. Episode 1, as I mentioned, is quite a linear path. Episode 2, though, all those customizations you do on the skills, the orientation of those leaders, you've got 5 of them, and where they end up can be a different story. I mean, you can play the recommended setup all the time, but honestly, swapping them around does cause some interesting twists. The player scaling, as I mentioned, is also a big problem here, because with 4 players, these games take forever, and you really don't get a lot of turns. In a 3-player game, you still don't get a lot of turns, but at least it's slightly less, it's a little bit quicker, and I find 3 to be the sweet spot. 2 players though, you have to play with the same solo AI rules that the solo mode has. So there's only 2 of you, but you've got this extra overhead of a solo mode to contend with. Why does it need that? Why couldn't it have been just a simple 2-player game? And that would have made it probably a lot quicker and a lot faster. But having to force you to use an AI, I just get the feeling that this game wasn't really designed for 2 players in mind, at least certainly not originally. Bear in mind, I'm sure the solo mode got designed after the fact, so it looks like you kind of designed the game for 3 and 4 players, then put the solo mode in it, and then realised, oh, we can make this for 2 players, and we put the solo mode in that one. It's like, what? That's kind of odd. And so, you really are going to have to decide, right, I need this group of players, this number of players, and that's probably the only way you're going to play it. Is that really the staying power you want? Right, so I've touched on the solo mode, and this is designed by David Turksey, who, like we say, I swear is a machine these days. You see his name literally on everything to do with the solo mode. Does this guy ever sleep? I'm not entirely convinced. But this is a very clever solo mode that's in the game. But it does have an issue with it. Firstly, let's just talk about the good stuff. It is really clever. You have a group of dissenters. It's essentially 2 AI players that you have cards that you flip over. You put a card on each particular AI, and then the icons dictate what they will do on their turn, but their actions can sometimes oppose each other, sometimes interleak, but basically they are 2 separate opponents for you. This mechanism is very clever, and you certainly have a lot of rules to contend with here. I mean, this is a rulebook that's as big as the individual rulebooks for the main game. There's a lot going on here, but it is designed very well, and it does work at mimicking a multiplayer opponent, so that's all well and good. The problem is, well, the fact that you've got this rulebook full of entire rules here. This is practically learning an entire game on top of learning an already heavy game. It's not like the rules intermingle nice in a nice little mesh. No, you've got to learn this and those other rules. It's too much for me. Now, maybe it was simple for you, I don't know, but for me, it was just maybe too much rules to learn.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
And honestly, unless you're going to play this multiple times, the same as I said before, you're just going to forget these rules. And people have claimed that, oh yeah, I played 1 game of this and suddenly I knew exactly how the AI worked and all the iconography.
That's very unlikely.
This game has you learning so much stuff that every single time I went back to the solo mode, I'd forgotten half of it and I had to learn it all again. Most of the time I spend piloting that AI, flipping the cards and then trying to think, okay, so what does that icon mean again? Hang on, let me just check the rulebook. Alright, it means that, right? So they will do that, okay, and so they're going to go on, hang on, they're going to put a wall down, hang on, what's the priority for this? Hang on, so if there's a dinosaur, do this, if there's a person there, do this, if you're there, do this.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
There's a lot of that in both episodes, and it's just too much to handle. When I played this solo, I was enjoying the gameplay aspect, which was what I was doing on my turn, but I didn't like having to spend more time than my own turns piloting the AI. It's too much. It's too much for me. And if it was your shebang, then great. I can understand that there are some people who really want to dig into the most meatiest of solo modes possible, and they will get enjoyment from this, and I've already seen reports of those who have. But this is just, it's too much. I wanted something a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier to deal with, but the idea that I've got to pilot 2 separate AIs, I mean, why not just 1? And you've got to use it in the 2-player mode as well. So you've got this AI thing that you're forced to use with 2 of you, as if it wasn't enough overhead to deal with. I don't know, it just was a bit much. But what about the Chronicles? You know, that nice little bit of extra content in the game? Well, it is extra content, but here's your rulebook for that. Would you like to learn a third or fourth rulebook on top of this? Have fun with that. It's even more rules. And if you're playing the solo, I mean, good help with that. I mean, yeah, I've got to learn a rulebook for episode 1, I've got to learn a solo rulebook, and the Chronicles specific solo rules in the back of that book. That's too much. And then you've got to play 4 games of this. 4. Okay, 4. 2 of episode 1 and 2 of episode 2, and it's mainly just to get a few cards with a few conditions that you can meet each game, which allow you to get some passive bonus or maybe some setup change in the next episode. That's pretty much it. I don't know how much time you lot have on your hands. I envy you if you have a spare 10 to 12 hours to invest in the Chronicles mode for this in a short time period. Because, like I said, if you don't play this regularly, you're going to forget all the rules by the time you come back to this again. I envy you, honestly. I would like to have your lives because you clearly have way more time than the average person. 4 games of this, 10 to 12 hours at least. In fact, that's a minimum. It's probably more closer to 15 by the time you've set it up every time and taught the game and learned some more rules and maybe fact-checked a few things. It's too much. And now, it will be shorter if you play it solo with 2 players, but certainly I wouldn't recommend playing Chronicles with 3 or 4 players. I think it's just too much. It's really in there as a solo boost, and for that, you know, I can see a lot of people really enjoying it. I'm not saying that it's badly designed or anything like that. It's just a step too far. So the final verdict for this one is a tricky one, really, because there is a lot of good stuff I can say about Perseverance. I mean, aesthetically it's fantastic. It's got a lot of cool components and a lot of great artwork, but you have to basically keep this giant box, you know, in your Calyx shelf, and you can't separate it, and that's a little bit of a problem. I think this whole episode format just doesn't work. The game will give you some interesting choices to make, with some varied paths to victory, although that's mostly in episode 2. Episode 1 just feels like it's a bit linear, apart from that dino combat track. That's pretty cool, but the rest of it is kind of the same every game you play, really. Episode 2 is where you get to really customize the board and your player character, but then, and this is the problem with both games, but certainly with episode 2, the duration is just too long. The 3 to 4 hours of playing a 3 to 4 player game of Perseverance is just too much. It's more time than I think I want to invest. Bearing in mind you barely get like no more than 12, 14 odd turns in the game. A 4 player game and you're barely getting 12 turns. Where's all the time gone? It's sucked up into the void somewhere. I'm just there waiting for my next turn. It's never gonna come, and when it does, it might be a 5-second turn for me, and then I gotta wait 10 minutes for someone to do theirs. It's one of those ones where I feel it's gone a step too far. The Vital Lacerda games, they have On Mars, and I like the Vital Lacerda games, but On Mars I thought was too much. Too complex, too many rules, too long, especially even with 2 players, and I just thought that's a step too far. Perseverance, I think, is the On Mars of the Mindclash game series. I don't think it's bad at all. I mean, it's got a very clever solo mode. It is good, and I think solo, like really heavy Euro solo fanatics are gonna love it. It's definitely got some cool tactics and strategy in place, and it's definitely got the aesthetics for it. It just loses some of that immersion. It is too long and a bit too much rules overhead to have to deal with, particularly when you throw in the solo mode with those dissenters. It's kind of like just goes that one step too far again. So there is stuff to like, and I do think there is an audience for this, but this is going to be one of those, I think, really niche heavy Euro games. I recommend this only for the die-hard Euro game heavy players who play pretty much nothing but heavy Euro games, don't care if a game takes 4 hours, clearly have too much time on their hands as a result, but are willing to put in the investment and the money and the storage capacity for this game. I think they are gonna love it. For me though, this is sadly the first misstep that Mindclash has done for me.
Kill him. Kill him now.
You know, I will play it if it's on the table, but that depends on the player count, and even then you're going to have to convince me, because I know that I'm not really going to be doing that much in the game from a turn-by-turn perspective. So, as much as I love Anachrony, and Anachrony's a 10 out of 10 for me, Tricarion's a 9 out of 10, and so's Cerebria, I love those 3 games. Perseverance, I'm afraid, falls short, and only gets a 6 out of 10 for me. I think it's just that too niche. It's not, I'm not expecting a game by Mindclash to be casual. I mean, the new set teamer that they're advertising, this is going to be our lightest game to date. Yeah, lightest game to date. That I'll believe when I see it. But with this one, I just think it's like, you know, let's throw everything in the kitchen sink into this one box, give you 2 episodes that you can't separate, and it just hurts it more than it does. I mean, there's that phrase, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. I don't think that applies here. I think the whole actually becomes slightly worse than the sum of its parts, because I think the individual parts would function better if they were just standalone games, like packaged as such. Now, when they do the Kickstarter for episodes 3 and 4, I don't know if I'm going to be that interested. I mean, I'm going to have to look at it again and go, right, so this is packaged as 2 episodes. Right, do I like the sound of both episodes? 3 doesn't really get my drift. Well, I guess I won't buy that then. It's just too niche. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please thumbs up the video, consider subscribing, maybe join the Patreon if you want to help this channel get more review copies or more Kickstarter games to give you review content on, because certainly there was no way I was getting a review copy of this one. But also, just let me know your thoughts on the game in question. Do you love Mindclash games in general? Do you agree with the verdict, or are you a massive diehard fan of this? It'd be cool to know your thoughts, because this is definitely going to be one of those ones where I think there's a very divisive viewpoint on that. But until next time, you can check out more content on my channel, including the detailed review I did for Merchants of the Dark Road, and also my top 10 games for 5 players that I did shortly after my live stream that I did with Mark on 6-player games. Take care, and remember, as always, no matter how big you want your games to be, they're still, at the end of the day, only games. Bye for now, everyone.